Well, hi again. I'm very glad to introduce you our next speaker, Wei-Meng. He's our next second year in a row speaker and second year in a row workshop instructor. So please welcome.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Okay, good. Okay, so let me just start my screen recording. Okay, so it's good to be back. So last year I talked about Bluetooth low energy and beacons. So this year I'm back again to talk to you about something different. So for the next 45 minutes or so, I'm going to talk about something that is, I think, of interest to a lot of people, how to develop cross-platform apps using React Native. Now, can I have a show of hands? How many of you are actually iOS developers? That means you eat Xcode for breakfast. Swift, Objective-C. Okay, you guys have a very high threshold for pain. How about Android developers? Okay, so as I understand, I think in Norway, there are literally no Android users, right? It's all iPhone, right? No. Okay, so now for the in the interest of time, I'm going to show you the demos using iPhone. So, but the projects that I'm going to do will work on Android as well. So let's begin. So let me just set the scenario for the agenda for the next 45 minutes. So my main aim for this session is for those of you who have yet to get started with React Native. That means those of you who have written native code using Xcode, Android Studio, and you are looking for a way to actually develop a single code base that runs on multiple platforms. That is iOS as well as Android. How many of you have actually started on React Native? Wow, why are you here? So, but anyway, so later on when I show the demos, for those of you who are already familiar with React Native, just pretend to be very impressed. Would that be okay? So try to influence the people next to you who have not yet started to get involved with React Native. So I want to get you started with React Native. I will paint the motivation for learning React Native. Why is it important for you to learn React Native now? I will show you some demos on things like live reload, hot reload, stuff like this. And I will show you how to actually perform common tasks in your mobile development. Things like how to get your location, how to actually display maps on your application, how to do navigation apps, how to do tab applications. And one very cool feature is I'll show you how to do code push. Code push is basically a service provided by this company that allows you to actually dynamically update your app without going through App Store again. Now today, if you have been using Xcode and Android Studio to develop your apps, after you are done with a project, you would actually deploy your applications onto the App Store and Google Play. And then if, let's say, something went wrong, you need to do some bug fixes, what normally is the things that you need to do is you have to recompile your code, upload again to App Store or Google Play. Using code push, as soon as the users have actually downloaded your app and installed onto their device, you could actually update without going through the App Store. Okay, so I mentioned about this code push was it's actually a service by a particular company. Which company is the one that is doing code push? Make a guess. Microsoft, and I think that's the last company that you would think of when it comes to doing code push, right? But amazingly, it's Microsoft. Now, so let's talk about what is React Native. So I think most of the people have heard of what is React Native. So it's basically a JavaScript framework for writing native iOS and Android apps. So I want to focus on the word native. It is a pure native application. It is not a hybrid app that runs your code within a web view. So it is based on React, Facebook's JavaScript library for building web applications. And React Native apps are written using a mixture of the following. So first thing is JavaScript. So as I suspect, I think most of you are already familiar with JavaScript. You guys love JavaScript, right? Yes? Just say yes. Okay. CSS. So I guess most of you have a background in web development. So CSS is nothing new to you. And then the highlight is JSX. JSX is JavaScript extension. Basically, you create your React Native app using a combination of JavaScript plus XML. So you have your UI, you have your code. Sounds familiar? If you've this sounds something familiar, similar to something in year 2000. Wait, where were you in year 2000? You heard of something called Microsoft ASP, Active Server Pages? Where were you in year 2000? Have you started programming? Yes? So ASP, we have what we call spaghetti code, right? So we have HTML, and then we have our VB script. Have you heard of VB script? Okay, if you have not heard of VB script, good for you. Now, so we are back to the original days of spaghetti code, but trust me, this is not that bad. So you have JSX, and it basically, React Native basically translate your UI into native UI elements. So hence your app is a pure native app. So I'm going to show you some demos. So why React Native? Now, there are several reasons for learning React Native. I think the first unofficial reason is this. When you go for a job interview, so your potential employer is going to ask you, how many years of experience do you have with React Native? Do you have 10 years working experience? The good news is they can never ask you this question because React Native is still very, very young. How many years have React Native been around? Make a guess. How old? It's 2.5 years. So the good news is that your employer cannot ask you for 10 years working experience with React Native. So if you start learning React Native now, you are as good as the guy sitting next to you. So everybody is on an equal footing. So you can use React Native to actually write cross-platform apps. So Facebook says that it has got a very high percentage of code reuse. If I remember, it was something like 80%. So it depends on the type of applications that you're trying to build, but for most business applications, the percentage of code reuse is pretty high. So something between 80-90%. Now, your app retains the native look and feel of each platform. It is no longer it's not a hybrid app where the look and feel is very much web-based. So your application is now a first-class citizen on the respective platforms. And it is pure native and very, very efficient testing. Now, using Xcode or Android Studio, every time you make some changes to your code, you have to recompile your app and then redeploy that onto your simulator, emulator, or real devices. For React Native, you could simply do a refresh on the device, simulator, or emulator, and the changes are immediately updated on the device itself. So I'll show you a demo on that later on. So very good community support. So React Native, it runs based on Node.js. How many Node.js are there, developers are there in this room? So if you are familiar with Node.js, you would feel very comfortable with React Native because you have a lot of third-party module developers. So basically, whatever features you want to have in your application, somebody has already written that code for you. So I like to say that there is a package for that. So basically, whatever things you want. I think in yesterday's one of the React Native sessions, some people were actually asking about how to use Bluetooth in your React Native. There are packages available where you can actually do an npm install, and then once you install that, you can actually call your Bluetooth APIs through your JavaScript. So anything that you need, just Google that. Code push, I'm going to show you how to dynamically update your UI using this thing called code push. So you can actually bypass App Store or Google Play, and you can actually dynamically update the UI of your application. So that saves a lot of time. Now, this is how you install React Native. So you first of all install Node.js, and just take note, React Native requires Node.js version 4 and above. So the first thing you need to do is update your Node.js version and then install the React Native CLI and install something called Watchman, which allows you to actually monitor the changes in your JavaScript files and update your applications automatically. So once that is done, you are good to go. So let me show you a demo on how to get started with a React Native application. So let me just go to my terminal. So now the easiest way to get started is this, React Native init. So we have to follow tradition, right? Hello world. So let's run this. So it will go ahead and create the project. Now, any Dropbox users in this room? Dropbox users? Okay, you have been warned. Do not back up your React Native projects on Dropbox. Anybody tried that? The reason is every React Native project, when they create a Hello World project, you have about 30,000 files created. And the size of that app, if the size of that project folder is about 200 megabytes. So when I was doing my preparing for my workshop, I had 20 overlap exercises, and I synchronized everything on Dropbox until my Dropbox died. So now I could never synchronize my Dropbox properly. When I contacted support, they never mind. Anyway, now so. This is the project we have created, Hello World. So let me just show you this. So this is my Hello World project. And when you create a React Native project, you have a number of folders, you have a number of files. So if you look at this, the first folder that you would encounter is what we call Android. So basically, this is an Android Studio project. This is your native code. So you can load up your Android Studio, load up this project, and you have your project in Java. Now, for iOS, this is basically an Xcode project. Open up this project using Xcode, and you have your native code written in what language? Objective-C. Okay, so by default, the React Native project is created using Objective-C, but that's not our concern here. Now, the most important thing here is that we have a, let me see, are they still running? Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think they have changed the syntax. But anyway, so basically you have an index.js and you have a app.js. So if I open up this app.js, I will basically see the following. So I have a import statement. So I import from React, I import from React Native, and I have a render function. And this render function basically is going to create your UI. So this is what your UI is going to look like. So let me just open up this project. So let me open up my iOS project. Okay, so and I'm going to download and deploy this onto my iPhone 8 simulator. So let me just deploy this. Okay, so it's just deploying. How many of you have actually updated to the latest Xcode 9? Do you realize your simulator, after running a while, the whole screen will just display a lot of rubbish? So there is, I heard there's a fix, 9.1 beta 4 that addresses that graphics problem. So after a while, you see that the whole screen will just come out something that's gibberish. You just need to restart your simulator. So Okay, so it is still running. Okay, so while it is running, let me just continue my slide because I got a number of things to demonstrate to you. Okay, so this is the hello world. I'm going to wait for it to deploy. Now, what about Android? So for Android, you could actually deploy this onto your emulator. So you could deploy this onto your emulator and it should just work without problem. But for those of you who are actually running this on the real device, you have a little bit of work to do. So once you have deployed the application onto your, okay, so this is deploying, which is good. Okay, anyway, let me just continue. Okay, so once you have deployed your application onto a real Android device, by default it would not work. You will see a red colored screen. So what you need to do is you need to shake your device to bring up this screen, and you have to tap on Dev Settings, tap on Debug Server Host and Port for Device, and then enter the IP address for your machine that is running the Android Studio, followed by the port number 8081. Once you do that, it will now load the project correctly. Murphy's Law. What is going on? Okay. Is this running? Okay, so I think we are almost done. Okay, so it's launching Hello World. Okay, it looks to be loading. Okay, just give me a second. Okay, so it's almost done. Okay, now this is really bad for the HUD. Now, if you look at the code that I have welcome to React Native, and this is what you see on your simulator. So, and you have your text. So this part here is known as your JSX, JavaScript extension. So basically, you create your UI here, you add in your JavaScript code here. So obviously for this simple example, we don't have any JavaScript code. But if you look at this render is basically a JavaScript function, and it returns something. But in this case, it is returning XML. So, and this is what you see. Now, the really impressive thing about React Native is that if you make some changes, so welcome to mobile era, and I could just do a refresh. That's it. So I don't have to go back to my Xcode, recompile, redeploy. Okay, so I think probably if you are new to this is something that is really, really impressive. So this is the hello world. So let me just get back to my slides. So So for Android, it's the same thing. You can deploy onto your sim emulator. You can deploy that onto real devices. It's just that you need to configure the setting, the IP address for your machine that's running Android Studio. And then the same application should now work without any problems on your Android device. Now, so this simulator, or rather React Native, also supports what we call live reload. So I could just basically shake my device. I have a shake gesture. I can do a enable live reload. So when I enable that, I could simply go back to my editor. I could change this to welcome to mobile era 2017. I just need to save this, and the application would automatically be refreshed. So this is pretty useful. So it saves you a lot of time from redeploying your app. So let's continue. So that is live reloading. Now, so this is how React Native works. So basically, you write your code using JavaScript, using XML. So it will compile everything and put it into what we call a JS bundle. And what actually happens behind the scene here is that when I deploy, it will start what we call a packager. So a packager is basically a web service that runs on your machine, listens at port 8081, and basically your application will load the JS bundle through that URL. So whatever things you have written on your React Native, your index.js, it is bundled and sent over to your native application. So this is how it renders the UI natively. And so for cases like when you have the view element, the view element is directly translated into UI view for iOS. It is translated to view for Android. And at this moment, it works for devices like platforms like iOS as well as Android. But if I remember correctly, I think Facebook is currently talking to Microsoft to support the Windows application. And it is also talking to Samsung to support their TVs. How many of you have actually Samsung TVs at home? All those smart TVs, right? So very soon you will be able to write React Native app that runs on your TV. Now, something about smart TV. You know, when you have a smart TV, you are not only watching TV. The TV is watching you. You heard of this? Anyway. Now, I think for many, many years, we have heard of this slogan, right? Write once, run everywhere. But, you know, in reality, it's write once, debug everywhere. So, you saw this guy? Do you still remember this guy? That was 1995. What's the name of this guy? Okay, before you answer that question, it's going to reveal how old you are. So, do you still remember this guy? This is the Java guy, right? It's called Duke. So basically, when in 1995, when Sun Microsystem releases Java, they had this guy, and basically this guy is jumping around, spinning, and one of the demos that they had was writing a web page where you have Java applet, and the applet is basically spinning on the page, jumping about. So to demonstrate that you can actually write interactive web pages. So back in 1995, when we heard of this, I was still in university, so I was so excited that me and my few friends, we started a company, and we wanted to write pages that are interactive for companies. And back in 1995, all those companies are not really interested in this. When you go to companies and you tell them, I can write pages that bounce, that change, that can do some animation. Companies just look at you and say, so? So that was 1995. So obviously my company didn't do well, and that's why I'm here today. So, but anyway, I think React Native brings us one step closer to this grand vision of having write once, run everywhere. So it is a programmer's dream to be able to have a single code base that runs on any platforms that you want. Okay, so we are still not there yet, but almost. I think in our lifetime we should be able to achieve that. So JSX. So if you look at this JSX, this is basically like I mentioned, a combination of XML and JavaScript. In this example, you can see XML, you can see JavaScript. Now, JSX is not strictly required, but it will make your life really, really easy. Without JSX, this is how your UI is going to look like. So you will have to create all the elements by hand. Okay? So if you compare this with JSX, I think the answer is pretty straightforward. This is better. Now, so the React packager basically converts the source code of your app into ECMAScript, and then it basically converts your ES7, ES6 to ES5, and this is the so-called the standard and most browsers understand. And it serves your destination code at the following URL. So if you were running your package, your packager, you run your React Native application, you go to use the web browser, you point it to this URL, you'll see one whole bunch of JavaScript code. Okay, so have you read this article? Okay, so this article is very, very depressing. If you read this article, I don't think you want to live anymore. So it basically tells you how much things you need to know today as a developer. Okay, back in year 2000, if you know a few Microsoft technologies, you can do very well. But I think today, you need to know a lot more. You need to know a lot of open source stuff. So when you're free, go and read this article, and then you understand. Now, so in the previous session, you learned about the layout framework. So in React Native, you use the FlexBox for your UI layout. So you think of if you look at the way you lay out your views today using Xcode, you have your auto layout. Do you like auto layout? How many of you actually enjoy auto layout? Seriously. How about Android constraint layout? This is awful, right? So you know this guy? You know this guy? You like this guy? I don't, but anyway. Now that's not important. Now, so basically, FlexBox allows you to lay out your views very much like your web pages. So it basically has got the following properties, things like flex direction, justify content, align items. So FlexBox is not so bad. It's easier than coding auto layout by code. So I'm going to show you a few basics. So in this example here, I have a view, and within my view, I have another view. And I have this view has got a width 80 by 80. It has got this background color. And so when I run it, it looks like this, because I have a style that is being connected to this view. So it says that justifies content is center, align items is center. So I centralize that view on the screen. So I can also specify the flex direction. Now by default, all the items in the container, they are arranged vertically, column-wise. I can change my flex direction to row, so I can display it row-wise. I can also specify the sizing using the flex attribute. So in this case, if I have flex 1, flex 1, flex 1, so it's going to look like this. Okay, so flex 1 basically means that every one of the views want to have the maximum size allowed. So in this case, I have 3 views that has got flex 1. So in this case, they have to be divided equally. So I also have, I can specify my flex direction to be column, and then I will display it column-wise. I can also specify a width, 90 in this case. And in this case, the first view would have 90 points, and the rest of the width that's available would be divided equally among the second and the third views. Okay, so I can also specify flex 1, 2, 3. So the width of the views would be divided in that proportion, in that ratio. I can also justify the content. I can specify flex start so that it is aligned to the top in this case. I can also align it to the bottom using flex end. I can specify space around. So I'm going to make these slides available. So because I have a number of things to cover, so I'm going to run through this very quickly. So I can also specify a space between, and then I'll get something like this. Now, the next important thing that I want to talk about is state. So this is something that is fundamental in React Native programming. So what are states and props? So states and props are key concepts in React Native. Props stands for properties. They are basically set by the parents, and the values are fixed throughout the lifetime of a component. So what is more important is states in this case. So states are used to trigger re-rendering of your app UI. So let me show you an example. I have the following example here. So I have a button. In my UI, I have a button. I have an activity indicator. So activity indicator is the spinner. So what I want to do is that, first of all, I set for the activity indicator, the animating attribute equal to this.state.animating. So this will enable or disable the spinner. And I set this to this.state.animating. So I initialize it this way. So I have a variable called animating. I set it to false initially. So this is my constructor. When I toggle the button, I will call this animate function. And in this animate function, I will basically say this.setState. So I want to change the value of this state. And when that happens, it will re-render the UI. So let me just show you a quick demo. So this is my spinner. So when I click on this, it will spin. And then when I click stop, it will stop spinning. So basically, the key concept here is that you make use of state variables. To update your UI. So your UI has got a lot of views that are a lot of components that are bound to state variables. And anytime there's a need to refresh your UI, you basically change the value of your state. And React Native would be able to know which are the components that have their state values changed and update all those components accordingly. So that is the key concept of React Native. And that is done through state variables. Now, the next thing is, when you are learning React Native, the first thing that you have in your head is that, okay, so I have been doing my programming in Xcode, in Android Studio. How do I do some of the things that I have been doing in my native code? So I'm going to go through some concerns that you have. So how to use the various components in React Native, how to have something like table view that you are very familiar in iOS, and how to actually get locations, how to display maps, and how to create tab and navigational applications, and how to actually persist your data using databases or using things like shared preferences, so on and so forth. So here are the components that are available in React Native. So if you look at the components, the list of components here, all those that ends with the iOS suffix only runs on iOS, and those with the Android suffix runs only on Android. And for the rest of them, they are cross-platform. So, but what happens if you want to do something that is not in this list? Okay, so don't worry about that. Somebody else might have written that for you. You just need to Google that. And chances are you will end up in GitHub or in one of the pages that on Stack Overflow. Are you all familiar with Stack Overflow? You know, real programmers don't write code, right? Real programmers go to Stack Overflow and copy and paste. Now, let's talk about table views, right? So, if you do iOS programming, definitely you are familiar with table view. So, In React Native, initially they have this this component called list view, but list view has been deprecated. In place of list view, they are asking you to do something called section list as well as flat list. Okay, so section list is fully cross-platform, and it displays items in sections, and it lists headers and footers, and you can actually, it also supports pull to refresh. So let me show you one demo. This is one application that I have actually written for a conference in Norway. You probably I have heard of this company. So my network is out. Let me just connect to my network. You know, when things will go wrong, it will go wrong. So, what? Okay, can everybody disconnect from a Wi-Fi? Okay, hang on. Okay. Okay, so let me. Okay. For some reason, this is not loading. Anyway, I'll come back to this. Now, this is a section list. So section list basically allows you to display your list of items and group them in sections. And this is how it looks like in iPhone, and this is how it looks like on Android. And if you need something that is simpler, you simply want to display a list of items, you can use what we call a flat list. And this example here is a flat list that I have here. So I can scroll through the list, I can select an item, I can navigate to another page. We'll talk about that later on. So this is written using React Native. It's 100% cross-platform. Now, what about getting locations? Now, you can use the geolocation API. And basically, the code looks like this. It's very, very simple. And again, this is cross-platform. You can run this on the iPhone, you can run this on the Android, and it will be able to update you on the latitude, longitude, and then given the location, you can actually do logging or display a map, which brings us to the next section, how to display maps. Now, if you want to display maps on your React Native application, you can use this React Native Maps component from Airbnb. So using this component, you will be able to actually display a map using Apple Maps in iOS and Google Maps for Android. You just need to apply for the Maps API key for your Android application, and that's it. You will be able to run and display the maps on your iPhone and Android devices. So this is a very good example of how to use third-party components. So basically, once you have created the project, you just need to cd into the project folder and do a npm install followed by whatever components you want, and then do a React Native link, and that's it. And you're now ready to actually make use of the component in your JavaScript application, and then you can just run your application. So this is how to display maps. So this is how it looks like on the iPhone and on the Android device. Now, what about data storage? If you want to store data, you can use async storage. So this is the equivalent of user defaults in iOS, and this is the equivalent of shared preferences in Android. So you can use this, and you don't have to worry about how they implement it natively. So you just need to call the APIs. And for those of you who want to store your data in databases, you can use the SQLite, React Native SQLite storage modules. There are many SQLite modules available for React Native. So you just choose whatever you like. Networking. So networking, you can use the fetch API. So the fetch API returns a promise object. So in this case, I am basically fetching a JSON file from Facebook page. And once I get that, I will convert this to a JSON object. And once I have obtained the JSON object, I'm going to return the movies. So you can use the fetch API that is built into React Native. Now, if you don't like this API, you can also use XML HTTP requests. You can also use WebSockets. It's also available. Now, I think the next important thing that people want to know is how do I actually create tab and navigation applications? So you can use the React navigation component. So this application that I have shown you uses React navigation. So I have a tab application. Let me just do a restart on this, and then I'll show you the navigation aspect of it. Okay, so while this is rebooting, I think I want to go on because I have something that's really nice to show you. So now this is how it looks like. So if you build a tab and navigation application, you can actually combine them. So you have your tab items here, and then for the speakers page, I have a view talks button. I can click on that. I can navigate to another page. So this is your navigation application. So if you want to do this, you can actually make use of the React navigation component. Okay, so next thing, code push. Code push. So like I mentioned earlier, the moment that you have deployed your applications to your user's device through App Store, through Google Play, what happens if you want to really update your app without going through all this App Store? So what you need to do is, first of all, you need to register your application with code push. And once that is done, the next time you want to update your app, and this is you will just need to upload your code updates over to code push, and code push will actually push it down to the end user's device. Okay, so let me show you a demo. Okay, let me show you that NDC app first. There you go. So this is a section list. So this is a section list, and section list allows you to display a list of items. And then if I select something, I can actually navigate to another page, and then I can select on an item, select this, and then when I go back, it will automatically update. And I can actually click on this My Agenda, and then I can do a filtering based on the favorited sessions that I have. And then I can uncheck this, and then I can go back, show the full agenda. And this app is written using React Native. So when I was first starting out on React Native, I wanted to eat my own dog food. So I said, okay, so let's build an app and see how easy it is to create something that I have always been doing in Xcode and Android Studio. And this app basically took me about maybe one week or so. So I was still learning React Native at the time. So it's pretty easy to get started. Now, let's talk about code push. So I have an application here that I have already deployed onto my simulator. So this is my application. And okay, so my application displays this text here, welcome to mobile era. So I have my text here, welcome to mobile era. So this is already deployed on the end user's device. So let's say the next day you want to make some changes. So I'm going to go in here and say, welcome to mobile era 2017. And when I'm done, I just need to issue a command. I just need to do a code push, release React, my app name, followed by iOS, and then I'm going to upload this to code push. Now, code push is something that is a little bit grayish at this moment. Whether Apple allows your application to be approved using this remains to be seen. Most of the time, from what I heard, Apple doesn't care. Okay, so you can actually use code push in your app. But of course, if today you declare that your app is a application for kids, and then tomorrow you use code push to change this to an adult application, then I think you'll get into trouble. So, but for most of the time, I think this is okay. Now, so my application is now in the process of being submitted to code push. And, okay, so it's in the process of submitting to code push. Just wait a few seconds. And what I have done here is that I have a button here that explicitly allows me to check for updates. So I can poll the server and say, hey, are there any updates? So you can either do it programmatically by asking the user to tap on the button, or you can actually schedule a time. So perhaps in the background push or whatever, you can actually, background fetch, you can actually schedule for updates. Okay, so it is now sending up to the code push server. Usually it's pretty fast. Okay, so 100%. Done. So now I click on this button. It will check. Aha, there is an update. So I'm going to install that. And there you go. Are you impressed? Okay. I don't know whether that's genuine impress or but I'll believe you. Okay. So that's code push. So these are the steps for you to register your application with code push. Demo. Now, you can also do platform-specific code if you have attended the session yesterday on React Native. So you can actually detect whether your application is running on Android, on iOS, and what's the version of the OS that you're running, and you can actually customize the look and feel of your application on various platforms. So using the platform component. So I don't think I have time to go through every one of them. Now, something fun. So when I was building a similar application for a conference in Canada, so I wanted to incorporate something that is fun. So I wanted to incorporate a chat application into my app for the conference. And I was looking for a way to implement the chat UI. Okay, so I got 1 minute. So instead of me writing all the UI, so I went around looking for a UI that's ready-made. So it turns out that somebody has actually done that. This gifted chat application that makes your application looks just like iMessenger. So you can actually do chatting with somebody. And then so I incorporated this into the application. I run a backend using Node.js, and I use Socket.io for my React Native. And whoever is using the application at the same time can actually do a live communication, very much like what we are doing here using Slack. But something that I realized, when I roll out this feature, nobody was using that. So it's kind of disappointing. Maybe Canadians don't like to chat with each other. So in subsequent apps, I decided to pull that out, and I said, okay, forget it. So developers don't like to talk to each other. Okay, but that is something that I think is really cool, and I wanted to illustrate this by saying that, hey, whatever UI that you can only dream of in native code, you can use that in React Native pretty easily. And somehow people have already created all the components that runs on Android, runs on iOS, and you could just plug and play into your application, call them using JavaScript, and you don't have to worry about things like layout, all those things. So pretty decent component, so check that out if you want. Okay, I think I'm running out of time. I hope you have enjoyed this session. Do you have time for questions, or we can...
Maybe for 1 or 2. Just.
Okay, so maybe we can have time. If not, I'll be around, so we can chat offline if you want to. Any question? Okay, if not, thank you very much.